Hello everyone. Before we start our lesson, let's just quickly recap what we have done in biology in the past few weeks. The first thing that we did was cell structure. So we looked at the differences between prokaryotes and eukaryotes, as well as the basic structure and functions of some organelles in a cell. We then looked specifically at DNA structure, the double helix strands, and the fact that DNA has complementary base pairing. We then specifically looked at how we could use that complementary relationship to transcribe and translate from DNA to protein. And the last thing that we looked at, which was on Monday, was on cell division, which is the process of duplicating one cell into another identical cell. And another name for this is mitosis. So that concludes the first area of biology that we're going to look at this year, which is cell biology. So basically, what goes on in a cell and how you can turn one cell into two cells. Now, for the next 6 periods or so, we're going to look at genetics and inheritance. And hopefully, I can give you a quick introduction into this topic. We're going to look at genetic conditions and predicting the probability of somebody getting a genetic condition based on their parents' genetic makeup. And lastly, we're going to look at evolution, which you do need an understanding of genetics and inheritance to understand evolution later. So this lesson is going to be the start of genetics and inheritance. And essentially, you need to be able to answer the questions of where do your chromosomes or your DNA come from, and how do you produce gametes? And the process is meiosis. So these will be the agendas for today's lesson. So let's just start with this question. Where do our chromosomes come from? Now, chromosomes, just for anyone who have forgotten, are essentially just DNA tightly packed with some protein. So when we look at DNA, we may draw DNA like this. So this is for example, a double helix. And if you have a lot of DNA that you pack really, really, really tightly, so this is a DNA. Think of it as a strand, and then you pack it around a structure. This is a terrible drawing, but anyway, let's say the bit on the inside is called proteins. I should have used a different color. So if you pack a lot of these together, you basically get what is called a chromosome. And we normally draw a chromosome like this, but keep in mind that if I zoom into this structure, I will see tightly packed DNA. So this is a chromosome. For the purpose of our argument, you can just assume that chromosomes are DNA. That should be fine. I'm just going to draw this again. So this is a chromosome. Okay, so chromosomes are just DNA. Humans have 46 chromosomes. I think this is common knowledge. If not, there you go. Humans have 46 chromosomes. So 46 of these tightly packed DNA pieces. And these chromosomes exist as 23 pairs. And these are called homologous pairs. So, oh, that's unfortunate. But anyway, so I'll put the picture down later. If you Google human chromosomes, you will see pictures such as this. So you will see that there are 23 pairs. So they're not 46 completely different pieces of chromosomes. You will have 2 on chromosome 1, 2 on chromosome 2, and then 3 and 4, and so on and so forth. And the way that this works, I'm just going to change the color, is one member of each pair you inherit from your mother. So let's say this is going to be from mom. So we'll go that from mother. Then you're going to get one member of each pair. And this is, I don't know whether it's the one on the left or the one on the right, but let's just assume that half of these you get from mom. And well, we can keep going. The other half, obviously, you get from dad. So that's how we inherit. That's where we get our DNA from. We inherit half of our chromosomes from the mother and the other half from your father. Now, cells that have chromosomes existing in pairs are called diploid. So di is 2. It's a prefix for 2. So diploid means you have 2 of the same thing, essentially. And all human cells, except for the gametes, which we'll talk about in a second, all human cells will have the chromosomes in this form. So half of the chromosomes are from your mom, the other half are from your dad. Oh, this is definitely from your mom. This is a picture of a human male, so this is the XY. So obviously the X has to come from mom and the Y has to come from dad. And the other half comes from your father, and they exist in pairs, so that's diploid. All right, I'm not gonna do the father. I think you get. I'm just gonna do. I do one more label here. So let's say that's father. Not saying that this is the only chromosome you inherit from your father, but you get the idea. So let's just go back to the term homologous chromosomes or homologous pairs for a second. Now the prefix homo, and you're going to see this I think next week as well when we talk about genetic conditions, but this homo just means same. So when you see like homologous chromosomes, there is something similar about the chromosomes. So the actual definition of homologous chromosomes are chromosomes that are similar in length and they code for the same function. That doesn't mean that they're identical to each other, they just code for the same function. The actual coding of the function may vary between members of a pair. So I'm just going to give you an example. Let's say we have two chromosomes in a homologous pair. So let's say you get the first chromosome from, let's say this is from your mom, and then you get the second chromosome from your dad. So they code for the same thing. And let's say the thing that they're coding for is, what's a good thing? Let's say blood type. So we're talking about blood type, and your mom's chromosome, for example, let's say this is the bit that codes for blood type. And in your mom's chromosome, the blood type coding is A. So that's the function that is given from this chromosome is the blood type, and according to this chromosome, the blood type is A. But if you look at your father, for example's chromosome, it has a section that codes for the same function, which is blood type. But let's say in this case, it's going to say blood type B. So one of the chromosomes in the pair codes for blood type A, the other codes for blood type B, but they both have the same function, which is coding for blood type. But I think you can guess now that if you combine these, so your mom give an instruction which is blood type A, your dad say blood type B, but the blood type that you're going to get is AB because you need to take both instructions into account. We're going to talk about this in a lot more details next week, but this is just an example of homologous pairs. So they code for the same thing, but the actual coding doesn't have to be the same. So you're going to have blood type AB. Obviously, if this is O, then your blood type is A, but we'll talk about that next week. I do have to point out that there is one exception, is that male humans will only have 22 homologous pairs because the sex chromosomes in male human is not homologous. Well, you have XY instead of XX, so they are obviously different. This is probably the only chromosome pair that is not homologous in human. Some human, not all human. Okay, so that's homologous chromosomes or homologous pairs. Let's talk about this in a little bit more details. So you're somewhere between baby and adult, but before that you need to be born, so that's the fetus. And before the fetus, everyone start being a fertilized cell. Now, a fertilized cell is a cell that can undergo a lot of mitosis to eventually become a fetus. And if you think about that process, that is amazing in itself, because how do you go from one cell? Imagine how much mitosis has happened to go from one single cell to how big you are right now. I think my mitosis stopped a bit short, but anyway. So in the fertilized cell, this cell is going to be diploid. It has 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs. So this is a diploid cell. 46 chromosomes, that's the number, in 23 pairs. And then once you have a diploid cell, they undergo heaps of mitosis to give a fetus, and then it grows. But before fertilization occurs, there has to be a cell that only contains half of the genetic material. Because remember, we just spoke about this just before, that you inherit half of your chromosomes. So you inherit 23 of your chromosomes from your mom and 23 from your dad. And there is a point, so there has to be a cell that only contains 23 chromosomes from your mother, another only 23 from your dad, and then they can fuse in the process of fertilization to give a cell that contains 46 chromosomes. So these are cells that contain only 23 chromosomes, so half the amount. These are called gametes or sex cells. So in male, the gamete is the sperm, and in female, it is the egg. So the sex cells have only half the amount of chromosomes as a normal cell, so that fertilization can occur. So what we're going to actually look at today is this particular process, like how do we produce gametes? How do we go from a cell that contains 46 chromosomes in the male and the female, how do we go from 46 to 23? And this process, going from 46 chromosomes in a cell to 23 chromosomes in a cell, this process is called meiosis. So meiosis is the production of gametes or sex cells that have half the amount of chromosomes. Pretty sure I have definition here. Yep, so that's gametes. And because gametes only contain half the genetic material, they are called haploid because the chromosomes are not in pairs and each gamete only contains 23 chromosomes. So what we're going to look at in the next video is exactly what happens during meiosis that allows you to have the genetic material. And you need to make sure that you do it very well, because if you don't have 23 chromosomes in the gametes, that's how we have genetic disorders, is when people have not enough chromosomes or too many chromosomes, which we will look at in more details next week when we look at genetic conditions. But that is it for this video.